My name's Eli. I'm 27, the eldest son, and if you ask my family, the quiet one. Not shy exactly, just not loud. I've always been the kind of person who listens more than talks, who observes before acting. Growing up, I thought that made me dependable. Turns out it just made me invisible. It wasn't always like this. Or maybe it was, and I just didn't notice until recently. But the shift became glaringly obvious this year on my birthday. Let me back up a bit. In March, my younger brother Caleb turned 25. To celebrate, our parents went all out. They rented a lake house 3 hours out of town, a modern glass cabin with a wraparound deck hot tub fire pit, private dock, the whole deal. They flew in 2 of his friends from out of state and even hired a private chef for the weekend. The photos were all over Facebook. My mum captioned them, "So proud of our baby boy. Celebrating Caleb in style. He deserves the world." There were group shots of them toasting champagne, fishing, playing poker, laughing around a campfire. One picture was just Caleb with the caption, "A king deserves a castle." I didn't like the photos. I didn't comment. I didn't say anything really. But that was the first time I felt it in my chest. Not jealousy, but this slow, creeping realization they wouldn't do this for me. Not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't think I was worth it. Still, I brushed it off. Caleb's always been the golden child, loud, charming, effortlessly social. I was the straight A student, growing up the one who didn't cause trouble, the one who stayed up late studying instead of sneaking out. And somehow that made me invisible. But I figured maybe for my birthday they'd still do something. My birthday was 2 weeks ago, April 5th. I cleared the day just in case. Didn't plan anything with friends. Didn't book anything myself. I didn't want to step on any surprise plans, you know. Around 1 p.m. I got a text from my mom. "Stop by the house when you're free today." That was it. No exclamation point, no happy birthday, nothing. I sighed, but I went. I told myself maybe she was just playing it cool. Maybe they were planning something small but heartfelt. I got there around 3:00 p.m. Caleb was on the couch scrolling on his phone. Dad was out back mowing the lawn. Mum was in the kitchen humming. When she saw me, she smiled like I just dropped in on a Tuesday. "Oh, hey, Eli," she said. "You made it." I stood in the entryway for a beat. "Yeah, you said to stop by." She nodded, wiped her hands on a dish towel, then reached into the fridge. "I picked up a cupcake for you," she said, placing it on the counter. It was one of those generic grocery store ones, chocolate base, white icing, no candle. She handed me a card plain white envelope already half opened. Inside was a folded piece of cardstock that said, "Maybe next year." In metallic lettering. That was it. No personal message, no joke, just that. Caleb didn't even look up. I gave a small laugh, more out of disbelief than humour. That's it. My mom raised her eyebrows. "Excuse me." This is it. A store-bought cupcake and a card that literally says, "Maybe next year." She leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "Don't be so sensitive, Eli. You're an adult. We figured you didn't need all the hoopla." But Caleb got a whole weekend retreat, a chef, a cabin, a crown that said "Birthday King." "Well, Caleb's been going through a hard time," she snapped. "And he's more celebratory. You're so private. We didn't think you'd want a big fuss." I just stood there, the card limp in my hand, the cupcake starting to sweat under the fluorescent lights. My face was hot, but my voice stayed calm. "It's not about a big fuss. It's about the difference." She rolled her eyes. "Honestly, Eli, this is exactly why we didn't plan anything. You always make everything about you." That did something to me, something deep. I'd spent most of my life excusing this exact kind of treatment, telling myself they meant well, that I was just imagining things. But in that moment I realized it wasn't me. It never was. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone, snapped a photo of the lone cupcake sitting next to the card. I looked at my mom and said, "Thanks." Then I turned around and left. I got in my car, drove straight to my apartment, and booked a flight to Lisbon for the next morning. I'd been saving up for a vacation for 2 years, waiting for the right moment. Well, this was it. That night, as I was packing, I got a text from my dad. No greeting, just "Where did you go?" I didn't reply. Instead, I posted a photo on my Instagram, me at the airport lounge, boarding pass in hand. Caption: birthday retreat. No chef required. Within an hour, Caleb liked it. So did my cousin Danielle. Then I saw Mom had viewed my story. 10 minutes later, her name lit up my screen. I let it ring, then I silenced it. I sat back, sipped my drink, and waited for the next ping. It didn't take long. Another call, then a text. "Eli, this isn't funny. Call me." But I wasn't trying to be funny. I was done being the afterthought. I was finally putting myself first. And Lisbon was just the beginning. The first 3 days in Lisbon were quiet, peaceful, and more grounding than I ever expected. I wandered aimlessly through winding alleys, ordered pastries I couldn't pronounce, and let the weight of home fall off my shoulders one layer at a time. I didn't respond to any messages, I just watched. And they came in waves. First from my mom: "Eli, what is this about you left without saying anything? We're worried." Then Caleb: "Bro, are you seriously ghosting everyone over a cupcake?" Then Dad: "Please call, let's clear this up. You always overthink things." Each one was a little jab. Not quite cruel, but laced with that familiar tone, dismissive minimizing. A refusal to see anything from my perspective, like they were saying, "Sure, we hurt you, but not that bad." On day 4, I finally responded to my dad, just one line. I needed space. His reply came immediately: "Fine, but don't make a scene. Your mom's having a hard time." I almost laughed. She was having a hard time. By the end of the first week, I was getting messages from my Aunt Karen, my cousin Mallory, even Caleb's ex-girlfriend Becca, who I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Somehow, everyone had been pulled in like it was a scandal. Then came the guilt-laced email from my mom. "Eli, sweetheart, I don't know why you're doing this. We love you. We've always been there for you. I'm sorry you didn't like the cupcake. I'm sorry if you feel we made a mistake. But leaving like this, not answering. It's dramatic and it's hurting the family. Please think about your choices. Caleb misses you. We all do." I stared at it for 10 minutes. The sentence that stuck with me: "We've always been there for you." Really, where were they when I got into my top choice college and no one came to the open house? When I graduated and they left before dinner because Caleb was tired? When I got a job offer and the response was, "Don't brag too much around your brother, you know how he gets." And now suddenly they missed me. On day 8, Caleb called. I let it go to voicemail. The message started light, almost sarcastic. "Eli, come on, you're really doing this. It was just a cupcake, just a joke." Then his tone shifted. "Look, Mom's not sleeping. Dad's pissed. You blew this up way more than you needed to. We're trying to plan a family dinner next month to talk. You better show up. Seriously, don't make things worse." I replayed that part. You better show up. A demand, not an invitation, not a check-in. That night I sat on my balcony looking at the old tiled roofs of Lisbon and realized something. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was just done. Done being the one who was expected to absorb everything. Done being the one who made peace at the cost of my own sanity. So when the official group chat buzzed with a message titled "Family Dinner Mandatory," I didn't reply. The next day my mom called 3 times, then my dad, then Caleb. I turned off my phone. Later that week I got an email from my boss. "Hey, Eli, your mom called the office looking for you, said it was urgent. Everything okay?" That one rattled me. It wasn't just messages now. They were crossing lines I never imagined they'd cross. I called my boss immediately, apologized profusely, explained that I was dealing with some family boundaries and that it wouldn't happen again. Thankfully, she was understanding, but it shook me. It told me everything I needed to know about how little they respected my space. That weekend I sent an email to my family. "Hi all. I've seen your messages. I understand you're upset. I am too. But I want to be clear, I didn't leave because of a cupcake. I left because of years of being dismissed, minimized, and made to feel like my presence only mattered when it was convenient. I needed a break, and I'm taking one. I will not be attending the dinner. I am not ready to come back, and I don't owe you more explanation than that. Please don't contact my workplace again. That was a serious violation. When and if I'm ready to reconnect, I will reach out. Until then, I hope you all reflect. Eli. I didn't expect a reply, but I got one from my mom. If you want to burn bridges, fine. But don't act like you didn't benefit from everything we gave you. Family means forgiveness, Eli, not abandonment. That line, everything we gave you, as if emotional neglect wrapped in financial support was a fair trade. As if letting Caleb borrow my car for 6 months or co-signing his loan was something they gave me. That's when I started considering a permanent move. Lisbon wasn't just a break anymore, it was becoming home. I started looking into visa options. I found a remote gig editing travel articles. I joined a local language exchange group. And most importantly, I felt myself returning to myself. The version of me that wasn't defined by what I lacked. That wasn't measured against a louder sibling. That wasn't always holding his breath, waiting to be seen. I didn't need to fight. I didn't need to scream. I just needed to stop participating in a system that thrived on my silence. And that realization, that was freedom. I didn't reach my breaking point all at once. It came slowly then, all at once, like water rising in a cracked vase until one day it shatters. For weeks after the family dinner, the tension simmered under the surface. I continued to play the part of the reliable older sibling. I nodded along to family group chats, sent polite one-word replies to my mum's passive-aggressive texts, and answered Caleb's calls when he wanted to vent about how stressful wedding planning was. All while, they barely acknowledged the fact that I'd been uninvited to a table I paid for. Still, I tried. I thought maybe if I held on a little longer, someone would notice. Someone would say, "Hey, that wasn't okay. We owe you more than that." Instead, the next blow came quietly. One Monday afternoon, I got a call from my bank. A flagged charge on the joint credit line I shared with Caleb from years ago, the same one we used when he needed help during his layoff. "Hi, Mr. Eli Reyes," the woman said. "We just wanted to confirm a $5 $200 payment to White Clover Events." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" She explained calmly as if it were routine. "A wedding venue deposit scheduled payment. Under the joint line. My line." "No," I said, heat rising in my chest. "That wasn't me. Remove my authorization, now." She paused. "Unfortunately, since you're still listed as the co-signer, we'll need a formal request to remove your liability. The payment already went through this morning." My throat went dry. I called Caleb immediately. "Hey bro," he answered like nothing had happened. "Did you use our joint credit line to pay for your wedding?" Silence, then a forced laugh. "Come on, man, it's just temporary. I was going to tell you. $5 $200 is not just temporary, Caleb. That account was supposed to be closed. I meant to close it, but when we needed the deposit, I figured you wouldn't mind. You're not even paying for anything else. It's family, man." That was it. Something in me snapped, not loudly, not in a yell, but in that cold internal way where rage and sadness compress into something quieter, sharper. I hung up. I called the credit company, filed a fraud complaint, and started the process of freezing the account. I emailed my lawyer. But what hurt more than the money was the message, "You don't matter. You're not even worth asking." The next weekend, they had a family planning meeting for the wedding. Brooke's parents were flying in. Caleb asked me to come last minute, probably to keep up appearances. I agreed, but not because I wanted to support them. I needed to see it for myself. They met at my parents' house. The living room was set up with wedding boards, floral samples, a mood board on the TV. Brooke looked radiant. Her dad looked smug. Caleb looked like he belonged there. When I walked in, Mum barely glanced up. "Oh, good," she said. "Eli made it." Like I was a plumber arriving to fix a leak. Caleb clapped me on the back. "Sit down, man. We were just talking about the seating chart." I sat. They discussed table arrangements, honeymoon destinations, a harpist for the ceremony. I watched as they talked about spending thousands like it was spare change. My name never came up. Then Brooke's mom turned to me. "Eli, are you planning to give a toast at the reception?" I blinked. I wasn't invited to speak. Mum piped in. "We figured you'd prefer to stay in the background. You're not the spotlight type." Caleb nodded. "Yeah, we thought it'd make you uncomfortable." I stood up slowly. You thought using my name for a wedding deposit without permission wouldn't make me uncomfortable, I said evenly. The room fell silent. Brooke's dad frowned. What's he talking about? $200, I said, looking directly at Caleb, on a credit line that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Mom stood. Eli, can we talk about this privately? No, I said. We're doing this here. Caleb stepped forward, arms raised. It wasn't a big deal. You make way more than I do. You could afford it. That's not the point, I snapped. My voice didn't rise, but the room recoiled. You took it without asking, just like you took the better room growing up, just like you took credit for fixing the plumbing when I was the one who paid, just like you always take, and I'm supposed to be grateful for the scraps. Brooke's mother looked horrified. Her father whispered something to her. My mom crossed her arms. You're overreacting. This is a happy time. Happy for who I asked. Not for me. Not when you still see me as a walking checkbook instead of a son. My dad, quiet until now, stood up. Eli, you don't have to make a scene. I looked him in the eye. I'm not making a scene. I'm setting a boundary. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. I handed it to Caleb. What's this? He asked, opening it. A formal demand for repayment. I'm no longer financially involved in anything tied to this wedding or this family. Brooke gasped. Her dad stood up. This is a disaster, he muttered. No, I said, it's a reset. And then I left. I walked out the front door, got in my car and drove away. There was no dramatic music, no one chasing after me. Just the soft click of the door shutting behind me and the quiet hum of my engine. But inside, something seismic had shifted. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. And I didn't look back. Silence followed my announcement like a dropped curtain. No one moved. My words had cut through the noise and landed squarely in the center of the room. It was the first time I'd ever seen my mother speechless. My father looked down at his plate like he suddenly needed to study the pattern in the china. Caleb blinked slow and disbelieving, as if trying to reboot the moment into something more manageable. Then, of course, came the explosion. You're overreacting, my mum finally said, the words sharp and brittle. It was one dinner, one joke, and now you're trying to ruin the entire family dynamic over what hurt feelings. This isn't just about a chair, I said, calmer than I felt. This is about years of being treated like I didn't matter. And the second I drew a line, you acted like I set the house on fire. My dad rubbed his temples. Eli, we didn't mean to exclude you. You always seemed like you preferred being left alone. No, I said. I learned to prefer it. There's a difference. Caleb stood up, clearly done pretending. You're seriously blowing this up for attention. You bailed on the family, ghosted us, and now you come back swinging real mature. You used my savings account for a ring without asking. I snapped, finally letting the anger show. You and Mom signed my name on a loan document, and Dad called my job behind my back because I didn't respond to texts for a week. So yeah, maybe now I get to swing. They didn't deny any of it. That was the worst part. They just went quiet again, and in that silence, something inside me unlatched. I left the house that evening without saying goodbye. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a speech. I simply walked away past the front steps where I used to sit during summer nights as a kid down the street, lit by the same streetlight that had once guided me home. But this time I wasn't going back. The following days were a blur of texts and missed calls. Messages from Mom demanding I be reasonable. From Dad asking if we could just sit down like adults. From Caleb calling me selfish, dramatic. And in one particularly low moment, a leech with a martyr complex. I blocked them, all of them. That week I crashed with my friend Jordan. We'd worked together for a few years, and he offered me the spare room in his apartment without asking for details. I told him only the basics, and he didn't press. Just handed me a beer, queued up a bad action movie, and let me breathe. At night, the doubt crept in like mist. What if I was being too harsh? What if I was reading everything wrong? But then I'd scroll through old photos and messages, little reminders of birthdays ignored, holidays spent working overtime so Caleb could afford concert tickets, texts that went unanswered for days until someone needed a favor. The facts piled up like evidence in a courtroom, and every piece made my resolve steadier. I started planning my wedding without them. Rachel, my fiancée, had been nothing but supportive through it all. She offered to handle everything herself if I needed the space. But planning together became something grounding. We chose a venue that neither of our families had ties to a coastal greenhouse filled with light and wildflowers. Intimate, peaceful, ours. We made the guest list from scratch. Friends who showed up, people who cheered when we succeeded, cried when we hurt, and didn't disappear when things got uncomfortable. My side of the guest list was small, but every name on it made my heart feel a little safer. There was still grief, a deep, unfamiliar ache that came from knowing your family might never see you for who you are, that they might always hold a version of you that served them, not yourself. But grief and relief can coexist. I learned that. The hardest part came when the wedding invitations were printed. Holding them in my hand felt final. One for Mum and Dad, one for Caleb. Addressed, sealed, and sitting on my desk. But I never sent them. I stared at them for days before shredding them into pieces and tossing them into the trash. My piece wasn't worth another gamble. About a month before the wedding, my aunt, my dad's sister Lynn, reached out. We hadn't been close, but she'd always been kind. She said she understood, said she saw it happen from the sidelines for years. Then she asked if she could attend. I said yes. The day of the wedding was overcast in the morning, but bloomed into sun by the ceremony. I stood beneath a canopy of white blossoms, holding Rachel's hand as we promised each other everything. No expectations, no erasure, just presence. Love. Later during the reception, as the first dance song played and the crowd clapped, I caught Aunt Lynn wiping her eyes. "You look free," she said quietly. "I think I am," I replied. That night back in our suite, Rachel kissed my forehead and said, "You made the right choice." And I believed her. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. I never imagined that peace could be so quiet. In the weeks following the confrontation with my family, the silence that fell between us wasn't bitter, it was clarifying. Like standing in the aftermath of a storm and realizing the house is still standing, even if some of the furniture got tossed around. I had said what I needed to say. I'd drawn a line, not in anger, but in finality. And now, for the first time in my life, I was building something that was entirely mine. I didn't go back to the family group chat. I didn't send a follow-up message. I didn't check for updates from my brother or attempt to explain myself further. I had done that for years. What came next wasn't about them. It was about me. With the weight of their expectations lifted, I could finally breathe, and more importantly, I could plan. It started small. I began waking up without that tightness in my chest, without mentally preparing for what favour or guilt trip might be waiting on the other end of a text. I'd sip my coffee on my balcony each morning, watching the sunlight creep across the railing like it was inviting me to try again. And I did. I reached out to close friends who had stood by me in silence, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know how deep the rift ran. To my surprise, many of them had seen it too, the imbalance, the constant one-sidedness of my family dynamic. "We never said anything because you never did," one friend confessed over brunch, but we knew. We always knew. Their support didn't erase the past, but it helped soften it. Slowly, I began rebuilding my emotional home this time, with sturdier walls. I replanned my wedding not around my family's wishes or politics, but around what made me happy. We chose a small vineyard in the countryside, nothing flashy, just intimate and warm. The guest list was curated with love, not obligation. Friends, co-workers, chosen family, people who saw me, not just what I could offer. My fiancé, bless his patient, grounded soul, helped with everything from tasting wine to assembling invitations by hand. He never once complained that my family wasn't involved. He just said, "You deserve a day that feels like you not like a performance." And that's exactly what we made. On our wedding day, I stood beneath a canopy of olive trees, sunlight dappling the grass, and looked into the eyes of someone who loved me, not in spite of my quiet nature, but because of it. The vows we exchanged weren't poetic masterpieces, but they were real, honest, earned. There were no last-minute texts from my mum asking if I'd reconsider. No surprise appearances, just silence. And for once, I welcomed it. After the ceremony, as laughter and soft music filled the air, I stepped away for a moment and looked around. This was my life now, built from broken pieces, but stronger than it had ever been. There was no bitterness, no resentment, just a profound sense of relief. I had stopped begging for a seat at someone else's table and built my own. It wasn't just the wedding that changed, it was everything. I started setting boundaries I used to think were impossible. I let go of checking in out of guilt. I stopped explaining myself when I said no. I deleted the old family chat thread that I used to scroll through hoping for approval. I also found joy in the little things. Cooking meals without rushing, laughing freely with friends, traveling to places that made my soul stretch. I went back to therapy not because I was broken, but because I was healing and I wanted to do it right. Some people reached out months later, cousins and uncle, even a vague apology email from my dad. Nothing direct, just a half-hearted hope you're well. I responded with kindness, but not with space. I had learned the difference. Self-respect isn't loud. It doesn't throw plates or make scenes. Sometimes it's as simple as not replying. As choosing not to return to a fire, you finally escaped. As for Caleb, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he had tried to recreate his birthday weekend on his own. The following year, rented a lake house, invited a bunch of friends, but fewer showed up. I don't wish him ill. I hope he figures himself out one day. But I'm not waiting for that moment to validate my decisions. The biggest lesson I learned through all of this: being the quiet one doesn't mean you don't have a voice. It just means you were waiting for the right moment to use it. I used to think love was something you had to earn, that if you gave enough, helped enough, stayed quiet enough, eventually the people you called family would realize your worth. But now I know that real love doesn't need convincing. It sees you even when you're not asking to be seen. So when April 5th rolls around each year now, I don't wait by my phone for a text that won't come. I don't hope for last-minute plans or awkward apologies. I take the day off. I bake my own cake lemon with cream cheese frosting because that's what I like. I pour a glass of wine, light a candle, and I toast to the version of me who finally realized that he didn't need a family to crown him king to know he deserved to be celebrated. He just needed to walk away from the ones who never did and walk toward the life he built with his own 2 hands. Story 2. My name is Megan Ross and I'm 31. For most of my life I played the responsible daughter, the one who showed up, paid the bills, kept things running, while my younger sister Camille lived like the center of the universe. Growing up, she was the golden child, talented, pretty, always adored. I was the one who brought home straight A's and stayed in on weekends. I didn't get praise, I got expectations. Despite that, I stayed loyal. I worked hard, got my degree, and landed a demanding but well-paying job in digital strategy. My parents hit some hard times after Dad's early retirement, and Camille's acting career never really took off. So I did what I thought a good daughter should do. I sent money, covered bills, bought groceries, helped fix up the house. I never complained. I thought maybe eventually they'd see me too. So when they planned a family vacation to Hawaii, I let myself hope this was finally a gesture of love, a shared experience that would remind us all we were still a family. They told me not to worry about booking flights. Dad had points saved up, and they would handle everything. Just take time off, Mum said. We'll send you the details. I cleared my schedule, took leave from work, bought new swimwear, packed a bag the night before, and showed up at the airport the next day at 11 a.m., 2 hours ahead of the 2 p.m. flight time they'd confirmed via text the week before. Except when I got there, no one was waiting at the gate. I called. Mom picked up. "Oh, sweetheart," she said with a sugary tone that immediately set off alarm bells in my gut. "Why didn't you come to the airport yesterday? We landed this morning." I stood frozen in Dallas-Fort Worth Terminal C, heart-dropping, as the realization sank in. They had lied, deliberately. I checked the texts again, the flight date they gave me off by 1 day, the time completely wrong. "You told me the flight was today," I said, my voice hollow. "There must have been a mix-up," she chirped. "But don't worry, Camille made it just fine." Of course Camille made it. She always did. She was probably the one who helped plan the whole thing. I didn't say another word. I just hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I just sat on a bench staring at my suitcase while vacationing families bustled by in loud, happy clusters. That was supposed to be me. That was supposed to be us. That night back home, I opened my laptop and started tallying every dollar I had given them over the past 2 years. Mortgage payments, car repairs, Camille's emergency rent, Mom's dental work. Over $48,000 gone. I opened my bank app and transferred the last $500 from our shared family account to my own savings. Then I closed the account. I changed the passwords on everything and pulled them off as beneficiaries on my life insurance. The next morning I woke up to a series of missed calls and messages. Guilt, gaslighting, "You're overreacting. You're tearing this family apart. After all we've done for you." I ignored them all. Then I wrote an email. "Dear Mom, Dad, and Camille, this isn't just about a trip. It's about years of one-sided giving. I'm done. From this point forward, I will no longer be financially supporting you. I will not pay your bills, fund Camille's hobbies, or cover your emergencies. I deserve respect and honesty, not manipulation. Please do not contact me for money again. Megan." I hit send. The fallout was instant. Mom cried, Dad raged. Camille sent snarky texts. "Wow, real mature. Guess we know who the drama queen is." Then came Aunt Linda's messages. "Family is everything. They're your parents." I blocked them all. But the real turning point came 2 weeks later. My aunt, Diane Dad's older sister, and the only one in the family who had ever seen me as more than a checkbook, called and asked to meet. Over coffee, she told me the truth. "Your dad asked me for a loan," she said. "He let something slip that didn't sit right, so I pulled your credit." There it was, a $14,700 credit card I didn't open, in my name, maxed out, 3 months old. "They used your social," she said. "And the kicker, Camille's not even in LA. She's been living at home working part-time. That acting career all a front." I sat there stunned. It was no longer just manipulation. It was fraud, theft, betrayal. I asked Diane if she would be willing to be there when I confronted them. She said yes. I didn't sleep that night, but for the first time in my life, I felt completely razor-sharp clear. The days after cutting off my parents were strange. Quiet but heavy, like the silence after a storm, when everything looks calm, but you know the landscape has changed. I kept waiting for the guilt to hit harder, but it didn't. What came instead was clarity. It started with little things. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. I stopped rerunning that airport moment in my head, stopped wondering what I could have done differently. Instead, I focused on the present, finishing a big campaign, at work, making time for yoga, again, trying that new Mediterranean place around the corner. Simple things, but they felt like mine, like my life was finally mine. Then the emails started. First from my mum, long, rambling, dramatic, talking about how hard things were now that they didn't have my support. How Dad was getting worse, how Amy was struggling, how they missed me, but they weren't sure how to fix things with someone who had become so cold. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I knew any reply would open the door again. Then Amy messaged me, short, almost hesitant. "Hey, I know you're probably still mad, but I didn't know everything. I thought you ditched us. Can we talk?" I waited a few days before replying. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say. When I finally answered, I kept it simple. "We can talk, but only if you're ready to hear everything, not just your version." We met at a small diner near her new apartment. She looked tired, older than her 28 years. Maybe the weight of our parents' expectations had started pressing on her too. "I didn't know they told you not to come," she said after a few minutes of awkward silence. "They told me you bailed, said you backed out last minute. I believed them." "You didn't think that sounded off?" I asked. "After I helped pay for the trip." She shrugged. "I don't know. They always said you were too busy for family, that you thought you were better than us." I nodded. That tracked. "They used me too, Amy," I said. "They used both of us, just in different ways." She looked down at her coffee. "I know that now. We talked for a long time, about everything. The credit card, the fake acting career they kept selling to me, how she'd been working at a cafe the whole time, barely making rent while they told her I had cut her off. They lied to both of us," she said. "I'm sorry I didn't question it sooner." It wasn't a fix, but it was a start. While Amy and I started rebuilding, my parents tried harder. More voicemails, more desperate emails, even handwritten letters. One arrived on thick stationery written in my dad's careful block handwriting. "You may think you're punishing us, but really you're punishing yourself. Family is everything, Jocelyn. Don't let money blind you." I almost laughed. This was never about money. It was about respect. About the years I spent giving everything I had, emotionally and financially, only to be treated like a background character in my own family. I didn't respond. Instead, I made a list of things I wanted to do. Buy a house, travel, go to therapy, reconnect with friends I'd drifted from, start saving for my own future. I printed the list out and taped it to my fridge. Then something else happened. My Aunt Rose called. "They came to me for money," she said. "Your dad looked awful, but I told him no." I didn't ask her to, but I was grateful. It meant the web they'd spun was unraveling. "He said they had nowhere left to turn," Rose continued. I told him that maybe that was the point. Maybe this was the consequence they needed. I sat with that for a while after we hung up. Consequences. The word felt heavy, but not cruel, just earned. That weekend I booked a short solo trip to the mountains. Just a cabin, a stack of books, and no phone reception. I needed space. And I wanted to prove to myself that I could enjoy life on my own terms. It was peaceful. I hiked, I read, I cooked simple meals, and watched the stars at night. One evening, sitting on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. The anger had burned out like a fire that had run its course. What remained was ash and space, room to build something new. When I came back to the city, I met Amy again. She was planning to enroll in a community college program for graphic design. Said she wanted to build a career, something real. "I don't want to be anyone's project anymore," she said. "Good," I told her. "You deserve to live your own life." She hesitated. "Do you think you'll ever talk to them again?" I thought about it. "Maybe one day," I said, "but only if they change. And I mean really change, not just say sorry." She nodded. "If that day comes," I added, "it'll be on my terms, not theirs." And for the first time in years, I believed that. I believed in my own boundaries, my own worth. Not just as a daughter or a sister, but as a whole person. I wasn't the family wallet anymore, or the fixer, or the forgotten one. I was me, and that was enough. The wind off the ocean in Maui was different from back home, not just in temperature or scent, but in weight. It didn't cling, it didn't demand, it simply passed through clean and honest. That morning I walked along the shore barefoot, the salt air washing my thoughts as much as the waves washed the sand. I had come here thinking I might cry, grieve, or maybe feel vindicated, but I felt none of that. I felt peace, and that was new. The fallout had continued back home in slow, expected waves. My mother tried creating new email accounts to guilt me. One message arrived saying, "Your father cries every night because he thinks he failed you." Another asked if I was happy knowing they were living off canned soup. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I had said what I needed to say. Every month I received a check, not out of remorse, but necessity. They knew the consequences. That repayment agreement sat in a locked drawer in my office, not because I needed to see it, but because I didn't. It was no longer about money. It was about dignity. For the first time, I had my own. Amy was different. She had started school. Community college at first, then an interest in business courses. She messaged occasionally asking simple things like how to open a savings account or whether she should get a credit card. Each time I answered without bitterness. She was trying. I could see that now. We weren't sisters in the way childhood dreams up, but we were two women trying to find their way past the stories we had been told. One afternoon we met for coffee. She arrived nervous, her hands fidgeting with her sleeves. "I didn't know about the credit cards," she said immediately. "I believe you," I replied, and I did. She looked thinner, quieter, like someone who had just stepped out of fog and was seeing the sun for the first time. We didn't talk about Hawaii, or the lie, or the acting dreams that never were. Instead, we talked about school, about how she liked her accounting professor, and about how she wanted to get a job that didn't depend on anyone else. We sat outside the coffee shop, and for a moment we weren't our parents' daughters. We were just two women sharing space. "They still blame you," she said softly. "They tell everyone you turned your back on them." I nodded. "Let them. I'm not living in their version of the story anymore." A week later, a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. It was from my father. "Jocelyn, I don't know if this will reach you or if you'll even read it, but I need to try. I can't say I understand all your decisions, but I understand that I hurt you. We both did. Maybe we were proud. Maybe we were scared. Maybe we leaned too hard on the one who always stood up. I see it now. We took too much from you and gave too little in return. If I could change things, I would. Not for the money, but for the daughter I miss. Your mother doesn't know I'm writing this. Maybe she wouldn't approve. Maybe she's still clinging to her version of things. But I'm tired of pretending, tired of justifying. Thank you for being strong enough to walk away. I hope someday we can meet again without all this between us. Love, Dad." I folded the letter carefully. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to reply. I didn't know if I ever would, but I tucked it away, not out of obligation, but because it felt like the truth, or at least a step toward it. Spring arrived. I bought a house, a quiet one just outside the city with space for a garden and a sunroom that smelled like morning. My promotion at work became permanent, and I took my first real vacation, not just time off, but actual rest. I travelled to Spain, then Portugal. I read books, I wrote, I laughed, I slept 8 full hours a night. And I started volunteering a financial literacy program for young women who had grown up without knowing how to balance a checkbook, how to say no, how to trust themselves. I saw pieces of myself in every one of them. One girl asked me, "How do you stop feeling guilty for having more than your family?" I thought about it for a long moment before answering. You remind yourself that your worth isn't defined by how much you give to people who only take. You build a life where love isn't earned with sacrifice. You forgive yourself for surviving. I still think of that trip to Hawaii, of the suitcase in the airport, the cocktail photo, the silence on the phone. Not with pain anymore, just recognition. That was the day everything changed. The day I stopped trying to prove I was good enough for people who never saw me clearly. Sometimes people ask if I've forgiven them. I tell them it's not about forgiveness, it's about release. I released myself from the story they wrote for me. I released them from the power to hurt me again. Forgiveness implies I'm giving them something, but this peace I found was always mine. They just taught me how much I needed it. Amy and I still get coffee. Sometimes we laugh, sometimes we sit in silence, sometimes that's enough. She's learning, so am I. 1 year after the missed trip, I booked a flight back to Maui. Alone, no texts, no calls, just me and the ocean and the wind that didn't cling. I stood on that same shore, the same one from before, and this time I didn't feel betrayed or angry or even sad. I felt grounded, rooted, like someone who had finally come home. Not to a place, but to herself. Story 3. My name is Natalie. I just turned 30, and if you asked anyone in my family, they'd probably describe me as the quiet one or the dependable one. Never the favourite, never the rebel, just the one who held things together behind the scenes. That was fine for a while until the day it wasn't. 3 years ago, I lost the love of my life, Jordan. He was a trauma surgeon with a passion for blues guitar and the kind of person who made everyone around him better. We were together for 5 years. I thought we had forever. One morning, Jordan took his bike out for a short ride before his shift. A reckless driver ran a red light. He never made it to the hospital. In the aftermath, I barely held myself together. I immersed myself in my work as a software engineer. I stopped going out. Dating was off the table. Grief felt like my new permanent identity. Oddly enough, my older sister Caroline became a source of comfort. She'd drop by with her 2 sons, Mason and Leo, and we'd play board games or watch cartoons. I think she felt obligated, but I appreciated it all the same. For the next few years, life was a series of routines. Work, eat, sleep, occasionally babysit Mason and Leo. Every month I sent Caroline a few $100 to help cover her rent or utilities. Her ex left her high and dry, and I figured, hey, family helps family. But a month ago everything shifted. It started at Jordan's old band reunion. A few of his friends got together at our favourite pub and played through some of the songs he wrote. It was bittersweet. One of them brought Jordan's old guitar. They let me hold it. Something about that moment sparked something deep. I missed him, but I also missed me. I wanted to do something that wasn't just about loss, something that felt like a step forward. So I got a tattoo. It's a portrait of Jordan playing his guitar, inked on my right upper arm. The detail is surreal. You can see the curve of his smile, the strings on his Gibson. It took 4 hours and more courage than I thought I had. I loved it instantly. A week later, I visited Caroline and the boys. I didn't think twice when I took off my jacket in the living room. Mason, who's 11, saw it first. "Is that Uncle Jordan?" he asked, eyes wide. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "He'll always be with me now." Mason thought it was the coolest thing ever. Leo, who's 14 and getting into art, stared at it in awe. Caroline, however, looked like someone had just walked in with a rattlesnake. "That's not appropriate," she said. "What kind of example are you setting?" I blinked. I didn't realize honoring someone you loved was inappropriate. Caroline didn't say anything else. We had dinner. It was awkward. She wouldn't look at my arm. The kids kept sneaking peeks at it like it was forbidden treasure. That night I got a call from our mum. "Caroline told me about your tattoo. Natalie, that's very impulsive of you." Impulsive, I waited 3 years. Then came the real blow. 2 weeks later I stopped by Caroline's place again. The boys came to greet me, but she cut them off. "Upstairs now." They obeyed. Caroline crossed her arms. "I don't want you coming around anymore. Leo asked if he could get a tattoo when he's 18. Mason said he wanted one of his dog. You're influencing them. I haven't even talked to them about it. They just saw it." "Exactly. They saw it. That's enough." "Caroline, that's ridiculous. Tattoos are everywhere. This isn't the 1800s. She didn't care. "You're not welcome in my house anymore. Not until you get that thing removed." I left in disbelief. That night I cancelled the monthly utility payment I'd been sending her. Then came Thanksgiving. Every year I show up with gifts, a homemade pie and something nice for the kids. But this year Caroline made sure I wasn't invited. When I arrived at my parents' place, arms full of wrapped gifts. Mum looked surprised. "Didn't you get the message we're keeping Thanksgiving small this year?" "So small it doesn't include me." Caroline emerged from the kitchen. "You were told not to come. I won't let you ruin this day for my family." "You mean our family?" I said. "No," she snapped. "Mine." I placed the gifts on the floor, stared her down and said, "Then consider this the last thing you get from me." I walked out, got in my car and drove straight to a nearby shelter. Donated everything. Back home I sat in the dark and stared at the ink on my arm. For 3 years I lived like a shadow. This tattoo was supposed to mark a turning point. Instead, it became the line my family used to cut me off. Except maybe it was me drawing the line. After I walked out of Thanksgiving, everything shifted. The air was different, quieter but heavier. Like something had finally cracked open. I didn't expect an apology the next day or even that week. But part of me, the part still clinging to the idea that my family would come to their senses, hoped for a message. An acknowledgement. Something. It never came. Instead, what came was silence. I kept waiting. For the boys to text. For my mum to call and talk to me like I mattered. For Sarah to realise she'd gone too far. But days turned into weeks and all I got was a dead phone and an inbox full of Black Friday ads. Then December hit. The time of year that was supposed to bring people together, at least in theory. Last year, I'd flown Sarah and the boys to Hawaii. I had pictures of Tommy squealing in the ocean for the first time and Jake quietly sketching on the beach hoodie up even in 80-degree weather. Sarah had smiled more on that trip than I'd seen in years. Now radio silence. So I made a decision. If they could shut me out over a tattoo, then maybe they didn't deserve to keep reaping the benefits of my love and labour. I opened my laptop and cancelled every reservation tied to the Europe trip I'd been planning for them. Flights gone. Airbnb's refund requested? I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just hit confirm like I was clearing old files from my hard drive. Then I took it a step further. I closed the college funds I'd been contributing to for 2 years. Transferred the balances into a new investment account under my name. No more quiet charity. No more paying for people who treated me like a cautionary tale. I wasn't being petty. I was drawing a boundary, a line in ink as permanent as the one on my skin. The next week I got my first real message from Sarah. Not an apology, not even a conversation. Just an all-caps text. "You're really going to take this out on my kids." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally knew exactly what not to say. I left her on read. A few hours later I got a call from my mom. It rang 5 times before I picked up. Tasha, she started already sighing. "Your sister is in tears. You can't just walk away from family because of a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," I said calmly. "She said she was glad Mike died." My mom was quiet for a moment, then she didn't mean it, she was upset. And I was supposed to just accept that like I accept everything else. "You know she has a temper, but you're the mature one. We just want things back to normal." "Normal?" I let out a short laugh. "You mean me paying for everything and staying quiet while you all treat me like I'm disposable?" "That's not fair," she said, voice pinched. "You know we love you." "You love what I do for you," I corrected. "But the second I stop being convenient, I'm a problem." She didn't answer, just sighed again, that old familiar sigh, the one that meant, "You're being difficult. Stop making a scene." I hung up. That was the last time I spoke to her that month. 2 weeks before Christmas, the phone calls ramped up. My aunt left a voicemail saying I was being dramatic. My cousin Mark messaged me to say I should just apologise and move on, that Sarah was just being a mum. No one asked how I was, no one asked about Mike. No one mentioned what was said at Thanksgiving. So I planned my own holiday, a solo one. Booked a flight to Paris, followed by Rome. No family, no guilt, just me, a suitcase, and an itinerary filled with places Mike and I had dreamed of visiting. In Paris, I stood under the Eiffel Tower at midnight, a warm pastry in one hand, the other tucked into my jacket pocket, brushing against the fabric, covering my tattoo. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. It was the kind of quiet you don't notice until you've had years of noise. No backhanded comments, no guilt-tripping texts, just the night, the city, and the stillness inside me. I posted a picture. Me at a small cafe steaming coffee in front of me, book open to a page Mike had underlined once. The caption, "Some families are made, others are unmade. I'm finally okay with that." A flood of messages followed. Friends, colleagues, even a few distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. "I see you. Thank you for saying what so many of us feel. You're not alone." I realized then that maybe my family wasn't unique. Maybe a lot of people were holding on to connections that hurt more than they healed. But I wasn't holding on anymore. I was finally learning to let go. Let go of the sister who only loved me when I was useful. Let go of the mother who saw my boundaries as betrayal. Let go of the narrative that said I had to keep earning a seat at a table I helped build. I didn't need their approval. I had my own table now. And there was room for anyone who brought love, honesty, and respect. By the time I landed back home in January, I felt new. Not fixed, not healed, but unburdened. And that was enough. Life, after standing up for myself, didn't immediately bloom into peace. For all the clarity I'd found, there were still mornings I woke up tangled in doubt. Guilt has a funny way of showing up uninvited, whispering that you're the problem because you've finally chosen to stop letting yourself be used. But each day it whispered a little less. Therapy helped. Dr. Martinez was calm and grounded, someone who listened not to respond, but to understand. With her help, I traced back the roots of my silence the way I'd learned as a kid to keep the peace by shrinking, folding myself into what others needed. We talked about Mike, about love, about grief, about how sometimes the people who raise us can't see us unless we're making noise, and how that noise is often mistaken for defiance instead of honesty. My Europe trip and the distance it carved gave me room to breathe. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was orbiting someone else's expectations. I was building my own gravity. I turned my energy inward. I signed up for pottery classes, started going on hikes again, and found a small community of other creatives who met every Sunday to share their work. It was the first time I felt part of something that didn't come with obligation or guilt. One Sunday after class I got a text, unknown number. "Hey, it's Jake, Aunt Tasha, can we talk?" My heart jumped. We arranged to meet in a bookstore cafe a few blocks from my place. He was taller than I remembered, all limbs and nervous energy. He didn't say anything at first, just hugged me hard. "I'm sorry," he said. "Mom told us not to talk to you. She said you hated us, but I didn't believe her. I just didn't know what to do." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I never hated you, Jake, not for a second." We sat for 2 hours talking through everything. His confusion, his guilt, his growing frustration with how tightly Sarah controlled the narrative at home. He told me Tommy had tried to sneak a call to me once, but their mum had caught him. "I wanted to say something at Thanksgiving," Jake admitted. "When you walked in, but I froze. I didn't know what to do. I felt like a coward." "You were a kid in a tough spot. That's not cowardice. That's surviving." He nodded, wiping at his eyes. "I miss you, and I miss Mike. You were the only ones who really listened." That was when I realized something crucial. Sarah could try to erase me, paint over rooms and rewrite stories, but truth leaves a residue. And love, real, honest love, leaves echoes you can't silence. Jake and I started meeting once a month. He was 17 now, almost ready to graduate. Smart, artistic, full of opinions. I supported him quietly, not with money, but with time and space and honesty. I gave him the name of my therapist when he asked for it, and he started seeing Dr. Martinez too. One afternoon he handed me a sketchbook. Inside was a drawing of my tattoo. Mike with his guitar surrounded by colour and light, but this time Jake had added something, 2 children in the background watching him play. It broke me in the best way. "I drew me and Tommy," he said. "Because you said the tattoo was about honouring him. Well, this is how I remember him too, And you always made things brighter. I framed it, hung it beside the photo of Mike and me at a beach concert where he played barefoot and the waves crashed just out of reach. Meanwhile, my parents stayed mostly silent. I still got the occasional vague message from Mum. We miss you. Hope you're well. Never anything deeper, never anything that acknowledged what happened. Sarah predictably kept up the Cold War, unblocking passive-aggressive posts about loyalty and family. But I didn't need their validation anymore. Instead, I built a new rhythm. I leaned into my work, took on clients I believed in. I launched a small online business teaching coding to underserved communities, something Mike had always encouraged me to do. You don't have to save the world, he used to say. Just light the corner you're in. So I did. On what would have been Mike's birthday, I held a small gathering. Friends, some of his old bandmates, even a few people I met in therapy group. We played music, ate homemade food, lit candles and shared stories. I didn't cry the whole night. Just once when I stood in front of everyone and read a piece I wrote about grief not being something to overcome, but something to carry with grace. A few months later, I got a call from Tommy. His voice was deeper now, still laced with that excited edge I remembered. Hey, Aunt Tash, I'm applying to colleges. Mum doesn't want me to not out of state, but I want to go to Oregon. I want to do environmental science. That's incredible, I said. You should go where your heart leads. There was a long pause. I know you said you shut down the college fund, but is it okay if I put your name down on the FAFSA? You don't have to give anything. I want them to know your family. I felt the tears before they reached my eyes. Of course, always. He didn't ask for money, not once. But a week after his application went through, I quietly reopened a new account. Not just for him, but for Jake too. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about choosing who I gave to and why. This time, it wasn't out of guilt or obligation. It was out of choice, autonomy, love. Sarah never acknowledged any of it. Not the gatherings, not the sketch Jake gave me, not the fact that her sons still came to me when they needed guidance. But that didn't matter anymore. I wasn't doing any of this to earn a seat at their table. I was building my own. Dr. Martinez once told me healing isn't linear, that some days you'll feel like you've made peace and others you'll hear a song or see a photo and feel like the wound's just as raw, but you keep walking anyway. I took her words to heart. Some nights I still missed Mike so fiercely I couldn't breathe. Some mornings I woke up wishing my mum had just said sorry even once. But then I'd look around at the life I was carving and I'd remember something Mike once whispered when I was spiraling over a bug in my code at 2 a.m. You don't have to be perfect, Tash. You just have to be real. So that's what I became. Not perfect, not always strong, but real. And now every year on the anniversary of that tattoo, the one that sparked an exile, a reckoning, and eventually a rebirth, I take myself somewhere new. I bring a journal. I write what I've let go of, what I've learned, what I want to build. The ink on my arm hasn't faded, and neither has my grief, but neither has my strength. Some stories don't get a tidy ending, but they do get a turning point. And mine was choosing to live not for approval but for truth, for self, for peace. The kind of peace you don't beg for, the kind you claim.